All right, good afternoon. We're going to get started. Thank you guys for joining us for the alternative financing portion of today's event. My name is Seiler. I'm with Umqua Bank Home Lending. I've been specializing in construction financing for a little bit over 8 years now. In the Portland area, Umqua has helped quite a few people finance ADUs, but we've had to come up with some creative strategies on how to help people bring that availability to the market. So today I have 3 panelists with me. We've got Tim Miller, President and CEO of Enhabit. I've got Adam Zimmerman, second panelist, and they're just in a row because we're going to make this really simple. Adam Zimmerman here, Craft 3. It's a nonprofit community organization here in Portland. And then Patrick Quinton, owner and CEO of Dweller. Each of them is going to give you what they do, what we bring to the market, and then how we can help your clients. And or people that are in general just looking on how do we increase the capacity of ADUs in the marketplace. So very quickly, I'm going to go over what conventional financing is available in the market currently, and that's what my company specializes in. And then we're going to delve a little bit into each of these 3 gentlemen's companies and what they can offer as well. So right now, the biggest hurdle that clients face is how do we finance an ADU? What does that look like? What's the process? How does it work? It is a fairly extensive process. There's a lot of pieces that go into play when we're talking about financing an ADU. Right now, you need equity, and you need to be able to see the future value of that ADU. When you're financing an ADU with a company like mine, we're actually able to take that drawing, that plan. So you design your ADU, you pick your builder, and I'm able to take that information and appraise the future value. Help you figure out what that house is going to be worth and what your ADU is going to be worth as a total package once it's all said and done. And then we can lend on that. There are a few hurdles though. What if you're lower income? Can't afford the higher loan amount right out of the gates. Or we have to pay off an existing mortgage and nobody wants to lose their 3.5% first mortgage rate. So there are a few things that come into play with conventional financing that throw up a few hurdles. Needless to say though, some people think, oh, there isn't any option out there. There is. So today what we're going to do is explore a little bit more of the alternative access to money for building ADUs. And I'm going to turn it right on over to Tim. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Hillary. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to join us for this session. We're talking about both financing and developing of ADUs. So I'm going to talk about what Enhabit's work has been. I'm going to give you a little bit of perspective on who Enhabit is so you can understand what we're bringing to, or our thinking to give it some sense of how we're coming at this issue, and then tell you a little story about a program we've done recently in partnership with the county, and then how that informs what we would envision as a program to help folks build ADUs. So let's go. And if I move around, can y'all hear me in the back easy enough, or should I stay with the mic? No, stay with the mic. All right, fair enough. Oh, for recording too. Okay, fantastic. Want him to be able to record it. Great. Okay, so Enhabit's background is we started back in 2009, 2010 as an entity to do deep home retrofits. These are $12,000 to $15,000 improvements for families who wanted to make their home more energy efficient. It was really aimed at energy efficiency. And that was a program we put together with federal help. It became a statewide program. We worked in partnership with Adam's organization, Craft 3, to create financing for homeowners to do this work. Involved a lot of partnering with contractors and the community and making all that happen. And we've always had equity as a lens, a primary focus of our effort. Also thinking about who the contractors are and who they're hiring so that we have minority and women-owned firms involved in this work. And in doing all that work, we've done about 6,000 homes now. We did that throughout Oregon and also serving up in Washington. We ran the program for City of Seattle called Community PowerWorks, for those of you who are from there. We learned that there's a whole lot more going on in the home than just energy efficiency. When we got deeply into these homes, we learned that we can also improve a home for seismic resilience. When we're crawling around in the crawl space, we noticed that there's some efficiencies. We could do more than one thing at a time. We also were always improving the health of these homes when we're in a home doing deep retrofits. And we also would do solar and other things. In doing that work, though, we learned that we also can do that work for lower income families, but they don't necessarily have energy efficiency as their primary or their first priority of business. They may need critical repairs. It might be the leaky roof. It might be a broken front step. It might be other issues in the home. So critical repairs become really important too when we broadened our work into lower and moderate income communities. So that has helped us evolve into a broader perspective, but all around the home. So we, through this work, again, we've done about 6,000 homes. We've generated about $100 million of economic activity as a sort of a job creation and economic driver. But that's helped a whole lot of families have a safer, healthier home to work, to live in, and has brought us to our mission, which is to create social impact through better living spaces. So that is what carries us forward now, and we work in partnership with communities and utilities and other folks who want to implement programs in their region to get work done to help families. So one example of that, bringing it to the ADU world, is a program we've done in partnership with Multnomah County here. It's a program called A Place for You, and Multnomah County has this really interesting entity built into the county called the Mill. It's the Multnomah Idea Lab, and they're all about coming up with innovative new concepts. It's kind of a funny mix of a local government and innovation to drive new programs, and this was a pilot focused on housing affordability. For those of you who aren't from here, you know, we've heard some stats this morning about the issue, but in particular, Portland's facing about a 35,000 unit shortfall of affordable housing for folks who are below 30% MFI, median family income. That's about $16,000 of income a year. That's a huge shortfall. Other folks may use the number 20,000, other folks may use the number 40,000, but as Susan heard me say last night, this is a huge shortfall. In fact, I'm sad to report that in the county, sort of a first ever situation is families can't get into the shelters. So they've never before had to turn away families. So this is a big, big challenge that we're facing. And Portland is now tied with Seattle as one of the top 10 most or least affordable cities in the country. So it's a huge challenge, and this is one tiny pilot to try to address that. But if we can figure out how to make this pilot big, then we can start to eat away at the challenge. So we did this pilot to put ADUs in backyards of families' homes. Homeless people would be in the unit for 5 years, a homeless family, or it could be one or two or three families throughout that 5-year period. The unit is paid for by the county. We help them build it, we coordinate it, and then at the end of 5 years, it's transferred to the host family. That's the basic proposition. We didn't even try to promote this, but it got a little bit of publicity, and 1,100 people signed up interested in this proposition. It was also people who wanted to help, right? A lot of people who signed up wrote comments in their entry saying, I want to help on this problem. So there is an appetite out there for folks to help, also an appetite for ADUs. What we're testing here is the ability to, can we drive down costs? Can we get these units down to a level where the county has an appetite for doing more to hit the economics that public budgets have? Can we innovate on community uptake and figure out the policy and what are the legal issues around doing this kind of work? So, great pilot. We interviewed a whole bunch of builders that had different unit designs and things, got down to 2 designs, and now we're about to break ground on these 4 units. And so our challenge at Enhabit was to deploy our experience of coordinating with a family making a big decision, with a contractor or builder, with permitting and other requirements. Hey, we have disco lights, that's kind of nice. And putting all that together and financing or figuring out how to fund the work and working with a program partner. So that's our role that we do in many programs, and this is a great example of that. So we vetted a bunch of designs, worked through the design process, worked on costs, selected 2, and now we're building them. There are actually posters of these downstairs if you want more specifics on these buildings. But the buildings are not really the focus of what I'm talking about now. This is just context of what we've learned through this process. We wouldn't necessarily do it the same way if we wanted to blow this out and do 300 or 500 or 1,000 of these. But it has the ingredients of pointing to a good model. And we've heard from many speakers this morning some of the challenges of doing ADUs. So I'll just quickly click through these. But Jake mentioned, I think, that financing is essential, but it's not enough. Permission is essential, but it's not enough. And somebody needs to hold the homeowner's hand probably through this process. So that's my basic premise, is there's an opportunity here to facilitate the process because it's complicated, right? Nobody wants not everybody wants a new 2-year hobby of just pure brain damage to figure out how to build an ADU, right? Designing an ADU can be difficult and intimidating, even when you're working with your favorite architect. Not everybody loves working with contractors. Even though contractors are wonderful, many of them, sometimes a facilitator is a helpful thing in the mix. And financing is often out of reach for folks who don't have equity. So you're going to hear from Adam, and you've heard from others as well, but Craft 3 has an idea about how to provide some financing. Patrick has an idea that goes even further than that. So these are the challenges. So what we see as a way to address that, again, is a facilitated approach. And I think you heard that this is nascent in some other geographies around the country. How am I doing on time?
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Perfect. Okay, good. So what we see is a one-stop shop where folks can come for facilitation. Again, we have experience with this because we've done it 6,000 times with homeowners doing deep retrofit work in their homes or doing other kinds of projects. And this is very similar, at least akin to that approach. And we have, my main point of the slide here is we have Danny here, who's emblematic of our facilitation work, ready to answer the phone and help people through a process. Proven designs would be very helpful, right? If we had a portfolio of designs, and Beth here with the Institute for Sustainable Solutions has worked with the Center for Public Interest Design. That's a lot of words. To develop some designs that could be a library of half a dozen designs that one could draw from that are proven, vetted designs. We know the cost, we know they're bulletproof, we know they can be built, flipped around, rotated, whatever, but to suit many needs. That'd be pretty cool. Vetted contractors who we know are reliable. And by the way, while we're working with vetted contractors, can we integrate some other equity considerations into who's doing the work? That would be great. Co-funding and waived fees and things. You heard a little bit about that, but again, if the public sector wanted to chip in on some of the capital of an ADU or just waive a bunch of fees, that can be a significant contribution to getting the homeowner to do the work. But with that, maybe come some strings. Maybe you keep it affordable for 5 years. Maybe you make it free for 2 years. Whatever makes sense for the negotiation or the policy objectives of that community. Financing solutions, we're going to hear a lot more about that. That can really be tailored to ADUs. Landlord training, once the thing is built, how do we help folks get it occupied, find the right folks to live there? But all this is awesome and nice. You can put together all these great ingredients, but you can't just put it together and then sit back. We're also going to have to market this work and tell people about it and get people involved and have a funnel where we can coach people through the starting process and all the way through it. So that's what we see as a program that's necessary to help get accessory dwelling units off the ground. You saw that, even with Portland's great experience, we're doing maybe 600 a year here in town. Seattle doing many fewer. We're talking to both cities about how to grow this work. But if we're doing 600 a year now and we have a 20 or 30 unit backlog, 30,000 unit backlog, we need to double or triple that. And again, ADUs are just part of the solution. There's obviously a whole lot of need for multifamily affordable housing, preservation of affordable housing for people to stay where they are, ADUs to go into backyards of folks who are at risk of their own housing stability as an income stream for those folks. But if we can double or triple or quintuple this work, we can start to make an impact. So looking forward to talking with any of you if we do have time for questions. That's what we envision. Looks like Patrick is next. Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Oh, you're getting those
I was-
slides, right.
Okay, so,
Myself here.
oh, I got you too, don't worry about it. So one thing I want to emphasize while these gentlemen are talking, and I think a common theme that you're going to hear from not only these gentlemen, but throughout the entire conference, is we hear the word complicated a lot, right? Especially when it comes to financing. One of the things that Umqua strives for, what Dweller strives for, what Enhabit strives for, is helping people walk through the process and holding their hands through that. When you're dealing with building an ADU, it's not a one and done, it's not 30 days. We are sitting there, we're having a conversation, and that may just be a preliminary talk. And then we're sitting down and we're talking about, what does the design look like? What is the money going to look like, and where is it going to come from? So all of the things that the four of us strive to do for our clients, especially when it comes to financing in many different forms, is collaboration. It's working together. Patrick and I have met on one occasion and talked about how we can help each other out. So as you're listening today, know that the word difficult can get brought down a couple of notches when you work with people that this is 100% their focus day in and day out. So we want to alleviate a lot of the stress that comes. And let's face it, money's the biggest stressor when you do anything, because when your contractor comes and says, I need money, and when your designer comes and says, I need money, we're the people that hear about it. So as you're listening today, please notice what they're saying and how they're presenting it, and how that might help alleviate some of the burdens that come along with the overall 1 to 2 to 3 year process of the ADU from start to finish. And I'm going to bring it right on over. Craft 3, Adam. Thank you, sir.
I'm going to do an informal survey because I can. Note that if you answer these questions, you might be outing yourself in some way. How many of you are homeowners? Can you get a show of hands? Like almost all of you, my goodness. You are unrepresentative of the population in Portland State. How many of you would like to build an ADU? Okay, here's the tricky one. How many of you have the cash or equity on hand to build an ADU? Yeah, okay, we lost it. You guys are kind of loaded, I'm not sure. I mean, that's really the question that we're trying to solve. You know, the money is, I mean, Umqua Bank has the money. The question is, how do we get to it, right? The banks are where the money is, people. My company is a nonprofit. We are based actually we're technically headquartered in Seattle. We have offices in Seattle, Portland, Astoria, Port Angeles, Spokane, Walla Walla, Klamath Falls, and Bend. So 8 offices across the Northwest. We serve all of both states. We are a nonprofit loan fund, which basically means what we're designed to do is take risks where regulated financial institutions, depositories, credit unions, banks can't take risk because they're regulated, because they're protecting all of our deposits, and we don't want them to lose that. So our job at Craft 3 is to find ways to put money into new markets, into new places, into underserved places, and sometimes into historically underserved populations that have been ignored. So that's quick and dirty. We have under our belt about $170 million. On any given year, we put about $50 million out the door. Most of that, 75% of it goes into small businesses. And 25% of it, and that's kind of what I'm here to talk about today, goes into what we call consumer loans. What we really talk about when we talk about consumer loans, with tiny exceptions, we're talking about unsecured real estate improvement loans. And right now, and those words are important for this conversation. Right now, we have 2 primary products that are unsecured real estate improvement loans. One is a product that we do with Enhabit and some other partners in Oregon and Washington, and that's for energy efficiency improvements. So you can borrow 10 grand from us to make your home more energy efficient. We will make that money available to you regardless of your position on, regardless of whether or not you have a mortgage, how much that mortgage is, the value of your home. We are making that loan to you based on the savings that come out of the energy efficiency improvements and our ability to look at your credit. And so essentially that's a consumer loan. We do another loan for septic system replacements. Same deal, harder deal, because ultimately when people are looking to replace their septic systems, they're up against a regulatory burden, right? They have the regulator saying, we have lots of poop jokes that we make. I will refrain from making one. It's hard to. But you end up in a position where you have to fix your system, or functionally you get a do not occupy in your home, and nobody wants that. So those are both real estate improvement loans that are for folks who generally don't have access to equity. That's what we have been noodling with, and I'll be quite honest, this is a experimental conversation on our part about accessory dwelling units and how do we provide access to capital to people who cannot go into a bank and borrow against their equity. How do we do that? And more importantly, I think, how do we do it in a way that makes that available to a broader section of the population? Not just people who have excellent credit scores, but maybe people who have mediocre credit scores. How do we do it for people who are in neighborhoods that aren't rapidly appreciating? How do we do it for people whose incomes are maybe closer to low to moderate income? How do we do all those things with a financial product and not lose our shirts along the way? And ultimately, that's the test. So what we have been experimenting with is the idea behind making essentially a consumer loan available. I'm checking my time here, I'm all right. Making essentially a consumer loan available that's predicated on the cash flow coming off of a rented ADU, okay? So what can be done in different neighborhoods in terms of rent rates, and then what's a loan that can be structured to provide the capital to build the ADU? It sounds easy, it's not. Functionally, that money that would make those loans available doesn't really exist. In my world, a lot of our money comes from banking partners. They lend money to us to lend money to things that they can't, shouldn't, don't. So that's completely something that is anticipated, again, because they're regulated depositories. They struggle to do certain things. But we can make it easier for them by proving ideas. And so the idea here is that we can make some of these loans and prove that people will pay them back. Prove that the cash flows coming off of rented ADUs are secure. Prove that the amount of money that they can be rented for can then be turned around to not only pay debt service, but can be used to pay property management, and then can be used to provide some sort of, frankly, monthly remittance to the homeowner. So it becomes an income stream for them. And the only thing standing behind it, those of you who live here, if you think about like Rockwood or Rosewood or neighborhoods in East Portland that have generally large lot sizes, but generally lower home values and generally populations that are lower to moderate income, but they own their homes, that's an income generating potential for them. If they can get access to the capital to put a structure in the backyard and rent it. And if we can structure something that allows them to access a property management company, so they're not challenged with, gee, how do I be a landlord? Because is going to be something, again, with Tim's brain damage, talk about like the brain damage that goes into building an ADU, the brain damage that comes with becoming a landlord when you haven't been one, is equally daunting. So if we can solve for some of those problems and provide capital, I think we can create a financial product that is relatively secure and performs. A couple other things to consider. From my perspective, oh, my timer went off. How much time do I have? All right, right on. So from my perspective, there's a couple things to consider. And as you're thinking about it and thinking about where the money comes from, one is, what's the effective interest rate that people will buy at, right? So we have this conversation, I'm sure you guys do all the time, which is, well, I hear on pick your media outlet that you can get a mortgage for 3.5%. I want 3.5% money. Well, this is not a mortgage, okay? But we understand that if we say it costs 10%, you're gonna walk away. Like, that's gonna be too much. So part of the consideration is, what's the price point, again, that will allow people to come in, that will allow the economics to work, and won't chase them off by saying, oh, well, you're charging me too much money, or we won't be charging them enough and the whole thing will sink under its own weight. The other thing is term. So we are contemplating something around a 10-year term, which is shorter than your average mortgage, longer than your average consumer loan. So those challenges both create, it's less expensive than a credit card and a longer term. So generally that kind of money is provided through a real estate-backed loan of some sort, and we're not talking about that. So these are the challenges we're up against. I frankly want to raise some amount of money to do some of these loans in Portland and hopefully Seattle. Seattle's got some other issues that they're dealing with in the city. Prove that people will pay them back, prove that we can manage the cash flow off of the tenants, and then turn to a depository and say, hey, look, and we have done this. We've sold some of our loans, our energy efficiency loans, to a credit union, and turn to a depository and say, hey, look, this is a good bet. Would you be interested in investing in this? Would you be interested in buying some of this portfolio? Can we make this a product that you will either invest in or frankly do at some point once the water is warm enough? And for me, it's really about, whether the number's 36,000 units or something like that. The potential for ADUs is substantial in both urban and, frankly, in places like Hood River and Astoria and Bend that are up against these same issues. There's a lot of money that could be invested in this housing stock. The question is, can we make it warm enough for the money to come in? Can we make the water safe enough? A couple other things that have come up. For us, as a potential lender, having simple designs and installation is really important. As soon as we get pulled into every snowflake project is unique, every contractor is unique, it jacks up the lending cost because frankly, it increases the amount of time that we have to spend paying attention to the project because it keeps changing. So I really like the idea of units that have simple designs and units that can be installed relatively quickly and painlessly, which is one of the fascinating things about what Patrick's been working on. Similarly with contractors, big deal with this is providing capital for construction. We have solved that with energy efficiency loans in the past. I think we can solve that again in terms of providing the contractors with cash flow that they need to put the units on the ground. And then, like I've said, is capital. Then, I would be remiss, and one of my board members is in the audience and I know thinks about this stuff. There are neighborhood concerns in both of these places about increasing density, parking pressures, all of those things. We have to address these things if we're going to take this to scale. We have to listen and be responsive to them as best we can. There is the short-term versus long-term rental. It's a fascinating conversation. I, right now, tend to side on we need long-term, naturally occurring, affordable rental stock. That said, same family in Rockwood, if they can rent out an Airbnb and make 3 times as much money, I don't want to stand in their way. So it's a challenge, right? And I don't know quite how to solve it, and I think this is an ongoing conversation. And then, like I sort of led off with, most of these units right now are developed by high net worth households. That's great for them, but there's a huge population that are homeowners in the places that we serve that I think have the opportunity to participate in this. We just have to unlock it. Done.
Thank you, Adam, even though you were taking shots at me at the beginning. So I'd like to introduce Patrick Quinton. Dweller has a fantastic model. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Patrick and chatting a little bit with him about what they're doing, and it's pretty remarkable. So last panel speaker that we're going to open it up for questions. So write down your questions. We'll be back in 10.
Thank you, Hillary. It's great to see such a full room here. A lot of interest. So I am Patrick Quinton. Glad to have our logo up there the entire time Adam was speaking.
We actually have a logo.
That's the way it was going. Craft 3, Adam Zimmerman again, everybody. So yes, I am CEO and co-founder of a company called Dweller, and Dweller is a startup that builds and owns ADUs right now in Portland and hopefully in other markets. And we are a private company and a market-driven company, but we do believe in ADUs. It's not just a market to us. We really do believe it is a solution to many of the housing issues we're seeing in Portland and around the country. I'm going to get into more detail a little later, but basically what we do is we build and install ADUs at no cost to homeowners by leasing their backyard and sharing the rent with them. We also do direct sales to homeowners, but people seem to be most interested in the first version of our model. And as Adam mentioned, we also use modular construction techniques to dramatically lower the cost of ADUs and to make the whole process a lot more efficient for homeowners. So we feel like we're bringing some new ideas to this market. And just a little background, part of the reason I think why we're thinking about it differently, it comes from the backgrounds of myself and my partner, Brian. Is Brian in the room? There's way in the back there is Brian. So Brian's a longtime entrepreneur. He started businesses in other non-real estate industries, namely telecom. He also has a lot of experience in residential real estate development. So a lot of practical experience on the construction and ADU side. I formerly ran what's used to be called the Portland Development Commission. It's now called Prosper Portland. But I also have a long history in both housing and commercial finance. So we really do kind of think about this this industry in a 360-degree kind of way, like what are all the different issues. And so I want to spend a little time just talking about how we view the market and kind of then how that leads to our approach. And the first thing we see is, once again, like everybody's saying, we're really optimistic. We believe this is a kind of nascent but growing market. There's a lot of demand. In Portland, obviously, it's easy to see the demand, but we think we see it around the country. And there's also a ton of options. If you want to get an ADU, if you want to build an ADU, you just go Google ADU. You're going to have so many options, and that's great. And as you heard this morning, some, not just Portland, but some other very exciting work being done on the regulatory front around the country, and that is the foundation for this market. Anytime people take on, whether it be local or state regulations, to open up this market, it makes all this possible. So a lot of great work going on, but as you've heard, there's a lot of constraints that remain. And once again, there's still pockets of regulatory resistance, and you heard those presentations earlier this morning, and so I won't get into it, but that work continues to need to be done, and I think there's great models of how to organize around that. What I want to talk about is the next three constraints, and I think you've heard a bunch of these, but first off, ADUs are too expensive. In Portland, typical ADUs are running $150,000 to $200,000. So whatever the issue is, whether it's lack of financing, whatever, we start from a point where the cost makes this pretty unattainable for a lot of people. And then we really don't have, other than a few traditional products, as Hillary talked about, and particular lenders who figured them out, we really don't have dedicated financing products. And that's, I think, the biggest constraint right now in the market. And as you've heard, we place the entire burden of making this unit of housing happen on a homeowner who does it once, and that's it. So it's unlike almost any other form of housing. Most other forms of housing are built by experienced developers. We require an inexperienced person or household to take this on. And so as a result, we have pretty much the entire market is left out of the product. And just more specifically, and you've heard this, we have low and moderate income homeowners without equity who really can't access this right now for a variety of reasons. And you can make the case that that's really the market, that the people that need this the most in terms of the extra income. And then we have the whole, people talked about this, who wants to take on this construction project? So we think most homeowners are actually left out. But as Adam mentioned, we also think this really harms the long-term rental market. And I'm not trying to, and I don't believe that we should be choosing sides over long-term and short-term rental. But as Adam mentioned, when you install an ADU in your property with the current costs and the current financing arrangements, it's highly likely that you're going to go to short-term rental because that's where you can make the most money, because you have a significant financial burden to pay back. So we think by rationalizing this market, we're going to make it easier for property owners to make decisions about whether they have long-term renters or short-term renters. But right now, when I talk to homeowners, they see short-term rentals as the quickest path to getting their money back out, and we'd like to change those dynamics. So our perspective is, and what we'd like to convince others, is that ADU should be viewed as a distinct asset class, that we need to start to separate them, certainly conceptually, but ultimately kind of legally from the primary residence as a way to open up kind of the financing of these. And they've been proven to add value to property. They're obviously a source of regular income, and that's quantifiable. So that alone should make it easier to finance. And we think that there's going to be increasing standardization across geographies. So it really typical asset class that can be financed has some predictability, and we think we're getting to that point. So our model, quickly, and we're out there at a table if you want to dig in, but we build our units off site and we install them. So we're a turnkey operator. We lease the backyard, we share the rent, we share 30% of the gross rent. We cover all of our costs, including paying ourselves back with the remaining 70%. We manage the property and find a tenant and handle all that stuff. We will work with the homeowner if they have particular preferences about a particular tenant that's well within fair housing laws, of course. So we try and work through that. But we also have a buyout clause in all of our lease agreements so that the homeowner can buy us out at any time. After 25 years, if nothing changes, the ADU becomes the property of the homeowner and we walk away. This is a model that we believe works across a lot of different urban markets. So this is one of the things I'm going to get back to, is the economics of constructing ADUs are really do work for a market solution. So we're working our first 2 units, so we still only have this drawing here. You can see it. It's a nice, kind of clean, simple model, 450 square feet, and different colors, and we have a couple different roof options. They're built off-site. If you've ever been to a factory where they build them, this is kind of what it looks like in the middle of the process, but it's wood frame construction, actual construction workers, people doing, you know, what you'd expect on a construction site. They're just dry and warm instead. They get installed this way, so we actually can drop it into existing urban markets. You don't need to have open space. So really is it's a kind of a, I mean, modular construction is not new, but it's a new approach to ADUs. And so we can all figure out kind of what the benefits are to homeowners, and I think the public at large, but we're lowering the cost, we're dealing with the financing issues, but there's also this kind of simplicity and speed about it. You know, you really have the on-site construction time gets squeezed down to an ideal case about a month. So you take away that whole, you know, that whole hassle of having construction on site. And moreover, we're really pulling back the construction of ADUs from this, you know, it was referred to as amateur. I think Cole said, you know, we're basically asking amateur developers to take this on, and we think this is a model where it looks more like another real estate product. We partner with, as Hillary mentioned, we want to be part of the whole kind of real estate, you know, kind of ecosystem. So we partner with lenders, but we also partner with realtors. We have a long-standing partnership now with Living Room Realty, who's helping us on both the front end, but also on our property management side. Is Aaron from Living Rooms in the back there? Is Aaron one of our realtor partners? If you want to talk to somebody from Living Room, she's in the room here. She'll be moderating the panel after us. People ask us a lot of questions. I'm happy to answer a lot of these questions in more detail afterward, but we've addressed a lot of what kind of the legal questions I think pop into people's mind. Do we have ownership in the property? No, we don't. Do we have a mortgage? No. Can the homeowner sell the property? Yes, they can. There's obviously a lot of nuance behind each of those answers, but we really have kind of worked through what we think is a different way to approach the you know, the kind of ADU as a separate asset class. So I want to end with kind of summarizing recommendations, and once again, we were kind of went through these. We collectively, public, private, need to lower the cost of ADUs. If you're from a public agency here and you're thinking about it, think about the cost that you're adding on to an ADU in addition to the regulatory barriers that you're removing. Think about the ADU as a separate asset class, meaning don't assume that it's just the homeowner building a house for their brother-in-law or to rent out on their own. Think about what can you do to make it possible for that to be financed separately. When you think about opening up the ADU market, let's solve for the low and moderate income homeowner. Let's solve for long-term renters. These custom-built ADUs are wonderful. There's awesome design work going on, but I think that's kind of distracted us from thinking about this as a much bigger market and what it means to service a much broader part of the community, and that includes standardization and scale. I've had people react negatively when I talk about a standardized ADU. I really do believe it's one part of making this accessible. And lastly, allow the market to work. You know, the organizations up here are a good example of how you can work together, public-private. But the market economics on ADUs are strong enough, particularly in a lot of the cities represented here, that the market will do a lot if we want to get to affordability and working with lower income homeowners. Let the market kind of tell you how far it can go and use public dollars to leverage that. I don't think it needs to be a public solution to solve some of these issues. The market really can do a lot of this. Thanks for your time. That's my information there, and our table is outside. Thanks.
We are actually on time. This is really exciting. So we have 20 minutes for question and answer. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and then you can direct it at any of our 3 panelists. In the back there. You, who turned, yeah.
Hi, I have a question about the, I have two questions actually. One for a Place for You pilot program and one for Craft 3. For the Place for You pilot, I'm wondering what is the tenant selection process and who is monitoring the covenant?
Great questions. The tenant selection process the occupants will go through the same process that are going through what's called the mobile housing team, which is a function of several nonprofits working with the county, of families who are coming out of shelter needing some more permanent housing already. So it'll be part of that flow of families or individuals who are needing housing, and the mobile housing team looks at those folks, applying fairness, but also understanding what would be the right living situation for each of those candidate families. And so from that pool, we'll receive candidate families to place into these units. Who is enforcing, what was the question?
Monitoring the affordability covenant.
Monitoring the affordability covenant, good. That's an easy one because the rent is zero. So there's nothing to monitor there. We may ask the families to pay 30% of their income, whatever that income is. That may go into a fund for themselves, or it may contribute to coverage of costs, expenses of maintaining the unit. Does that cover your question?
Yeah.
And you had one for Adam as well.
Yes. So I was wondering if Craft 3 has ever entered any partnerships with public agencies, and hypothetically, if you did partner with, say, a county, and they offered to back the loan, if that would be enough for an organization like Craft 3 to provide more favorable terms for the borrowers and the interest rate?
The short answer to both those questions is yes. The longer example is on the second part. Frequently, we will take some amount of money in to layer on as essentially insurance because we're trying to prove a new market, and we've done that a number of times. So that's not uncommon, and it functionally doesn't actually have to be that much money. That's the beauty of sort of having a public partner with a little bit of resource, and then a private entity that has more flexibility with leveraging other private money. So that's possible. The other story is, I mean, when in the middle of the recession, the three people sitting here figured out how to pull resource from the agency that Patrick was managing for an urban renewal area in North and Northeast Portland, and have it be part of the capital stack that financed Enhabit Clean Energy Works customers. And so that was made it able for us to continue to offer more and more financing for energy efficiency loans in those neighborhoods. So it's pretty frequent. And our organization is called a community development financial institution in some circles, and that's a pretty common practice with organizations like ours. Thank you for the question.
Okay, go ahead.
Which of you or all of you would be interested in coming down to Southern Oregon, to Ashland, where the Shakespeare Festival is so wonderful, and all the 80s views are full of tourists. And so we have a huge homeless population. And we own a home, we have a big backyard, and we're semi-retired because we ran our own business and got hit by the recession or whatever that was, the crash we call it. So we need funding. We have the will. The ordinance is about to pass our city council. So we're ready to go. That's why we're here. Who's interested in something?
I have an open job in Klamath Falls, if you know anybody. I'm completely serious. We're recruiting for our office down there. Yeah, I mean, and Ashland's a great example, like Hood River or an Astoria or a Bend, that has potentially the will to develop some of these units, but needs some tools to help and has housing issues. So yeah, I mean, we have to solve this larger problem of access to capital for this, but absolutely.
And we would similarly be interested. I have spoken with a gentleman from the state who was based in Medford who was looking at the ADU codes across the different communities in Southern Oregon and figuring out where there was opportunity. But he said that there was strong interest, and so we'd be happy to look at it. Our preference is to work. Part of standardization is the permitting process. Our preference is to work in single communities and try and get volume. So that would be one thing we want to look for is if it's Medford or Ashland or whatever, can we say, yeah, we're going to do 10, 20 units, and then we can kind of work with the city so that's not one-off approvals. We can actually, because that lowers costs and that makes it possible for a model like ours to work. So.
And I'll just add that our nonprofits model at Enhabit is to work with communities like Ashland and others. I referenced Portland and Seattle, but we've done work in dozens of other cities. If the city has a will to create a program that we can help implement to help address this challenge, we'd love to get involved with it. There are housing resources at the local level and flowing from the federal level. If we could get really smart about how to deploy those, we can make an impact on that housing challenge.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Well, so my question's actually for you.
Oh.
So on your underwriting guidelines, do you orient around loan cost, or do you, like I think the Craft 3 gentleman was talking about, account for some of the income and value, or what? How do you generally underwrite those?
So there's a couple ways that we do it. If the client, yeah, you bet. He's asking how we value loan to cost and how we value equity stake is really what it comes into, and then can we use future rents, I believe was the other question. Unfortunately, with conventional financing, we cannot use future rents on something that is not built. That said, I want to jump into the loan to cost question. So when we're actually discussing somebody owning a property, and let's say they've owned it for a minimum of 6 months, we will actually take the entire project as a whole, the existing home and the ADU to be built, and we're going to appraise that. Hypothetically, somebody owes $300,000 on their home. The cost to build the ADU is $200,000. We have a project of $500,000 total. Pay off the existing loan, $200,000 for the build. We will then appraise that. If that appraisal comes in with at least 10% equity, then we can lend. Meaning, if it appraises for $600,000 or even $550,000, we have room to move. So we have room to finance that. The issue then becomes, that all of us have been talking about today, is if you are low to moderate income, how do you finance that? Because you do have to income qualify and you do have to credit qualify. So we do look at future equity, which I think has been left out of a lot of the conversations. Everybody says, oh, well, I don't have $100,000 worth equity in my house right now. Well, we're not looking at what the house is worth right this moment. We're looking at what is your property actually worth when the ADU is on site. And that was something that Patrick and I have discussed with his ADUs, is what value does it bring once you actually have it on site? And then the rental income is there. Because if we have a lease agreement in place, and I can prove that rental income, long-term, not short-term, then I can actually use that to offset a residential mortgage. So they could, in essence, buy out that contract, put it on a residential mortgage, get their tax benefit for their write-offs, and use that rental income to offset the mortgage debt.
Then a small supplement follow-up to that.
Yeah.
Is how has your experience been with appraisals?
Well, I've done 16 ADU, traditional construction ADUs in the last 24 months. I only had one not appraised. And they were on different loan programs, guys. So again, it was different size ADUs, different loan programs, things like that. So we take it case by case. So every time I sit down with my client, oh, sorry, I clicked the button. Every time I sit down with one of my clients, we actually look at the feasibility of a project. If it doesn't work, I have collaborators I can call and say, hey, I've got a client, I can't do this, what do you think? Or potentially they need to just go get a HELOC, or whatever it is, we sit down and actually have that conversation. It's not just a one and done, fill out an online application. It's a true conversation, and it usually takes quite a bit of time. Go ahead, ma'am.
My name's Annie Rose. I'm a realtor here in Portland, and I'm guessing these have second lien on the property. And my question is, what happens when the market crashes, somebody needs to sell, and property values go down?
I mean, I'll answer ours. Ours is not. Ours
That won't ever happen.
The ultimate optimist over here.
Ours is not structured that way. We don't have a mortgage on the property, so we own the ADU as an improvement, and we have a recorded lease. So it's a little different structure. I mean, obviously, in a declining real estate market, we would have probably more foreclosures, and then we would need to exercise our rights as the owner of that improvement, but we wouldn't be relying on we don't rely on any equity in the property to get our money back.
Yeah, we're filing, so on the septic system loans that I mentioned, so we're filing a UCC 1A. And so what that functionally means is that when there's a sale, the title company lets us know, and they say, we need you to beat it. We need you to get off the title. And we say, then we get to have the opportunity to have the conversation with the homeowners. You still owe us a residual $10,000. How are we going to handle that? In a refi situation, we simply release and refile. And we've done like 5,000 of these, which is not anything like Umqua Bank, but it's not enough to know that it's been working.
Again, are we just gonna go back? I mean,
I'm giving you credit for doing so many good things in the community.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
thanks, Adam.
In ours, you can, through a sale, it can be transferred, so the new owner can assume the lease, or we can be bought out at that time.
Okay, go ahead.
Do construction loans, or what they call a bridge loan, ever come into play when you're working with an ADU?
So her question was, do bridge loans come into play with ADUs? Most banks don't do them. I only have one lending partner that does. Typically speaking, bridge loans are some of the riskier types of loans you can do. So your HELOC would need to be a bridge loan in that case. But with these guys, I don't know what type of, Patrick's shaking his head no. I don't know, Adam, do you guys do any type?
Yeah, I mean, with the products that we do now, I mean,
Right.
we've designed it to essentially solve for that problem. And that's part of the importance of knowing the contractor community that you're working with. So you have a fairly small group of contractors that you've been working with, and you're able to finance them essentially with construction loans through the proceeds of the loan that the homeowner has signed up for. So the homeowner's taking the risk, but the idea is if you do it programmatically and you're working together, the risk is relatively minor.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm gonna take someone in the back. Go ahead.
So thanks for the good work that you're doing and that you've done. I used to live in Portland, moved to the coast. I wonder, in a harsh maritime environment, like along the coast in Clatsop County, what's the anticipated life of that home? And then I have a question for Adam.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I could get your name and follow up with our builder on literally like a coastal location. I know that they do lots of other units and they install them all over the place. Probably more rural than but I think they have 50+ year life. I mean, they're not. I mean, they're. I mean, if you give me a second on the story, you ask folks who build these units this question about site built versus built in a factory, and they say we use same construction techniques, higher quality control because we can, and they say you try putting a site built house on a truck and driving on the highway, that thing will fall apart. Ours comes almost exactly as it left. So these are well-built structures. They're designed to take off all sorts of weather. I would place my bet on this before on a site-built one.
Great, thanks. So Adam, this is a question for you because I still see you as John's successor, okay? So you have a halo and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's nice of you.
So I still want modular housing too, only I want to use a mass timber technology, so just so you remember that. So the thing that we used to say in Portland was urban density is to community what garbage is to compost. So when you say, well, I mean, it takes some processing to get people to have a social fabric. And so when you say, hey, if people can make 3 times the revenue, it's like, oh man, that's killing our economy because we don't have housing for all of the people to do the work. So we're getting to have a widening gap between, I want to say, owning class and really servant class in the tourist industry in a lot of ways. So do you have some sense, since you're a triple bottom line, of how you're going to make community out of this?
So since you brought up, so John Burtis was our founder. He died last year. That's what she's referring to. So John would say, well, we also don't want to be paternal about it. and
Or maternal.
or maternal, but he would say paternal. I'm putting words in his mouth, not mine. It's a tricky question, but at the same time, again, if you're talking about a household that's making 2 earners at $70,000 a year, 2 kids, they might have 20 grand in equity that they can pull out of the house that they own, and they live, on 122nd in East Portland. And they say, well, hey, we can make 10,000 available, but that's it. And we have to borrow 90 or 80. And we know that we can rent this out short term and turn it, instead of having a rate of $800 a month, we can make 13. I hear you at the same time, and I don't know how to solve it. I just think we have to watch it. Would be my opinion.
Fair answer, thanks.
Go ahead, sir.
So I've been very interested, Patrick, in the model that you described, but I'm searching for how there would be an incentive to make your homes energy efficient.
Well, we start by, we're building our homes to Oregon code and
Code of the city or
the state, and the state, and ours are going to be state approved. So which is a fairly energy efficient code to begin with, and the incentive, I think, ultimately is kind of how we can build it into the cost going forward. I mean, we do have aspirations to make them more energy efficient and have other green features, and that will come as we kind of grow the model and can benefit from the cost efficiencies of scale. But right now we're building a fairly energy efficient unit, and I think the woman from California said it best. We're starting from a unit of housing that is very sustainable to begin with. So at a certain point, we got to kind of balance the cost, sustainability stuff, and I think it's a tremendous balance as it is, with the intent to get better over time. But
And does the owner have much, or the landowner have much input into the type of house that's ultimately lands there?
No, we're starting out with one unit. When we sign up with a homeowner, they get to choose the, things like color and whatnot. If we end up with multiple options, they'll choose that. But at the end of the day, if it's our unit, it's really going to be kind of our decision on how that's built out. So.
All right, we have time for one more question. I'm going to go with the gentleman in the back, because I know I saw your hand a few times.
The linkage to the CRA requirements of all our banks, especially in each town that has 3.5% of banks, is there anything linked yet or not with?
Sorry, I wasn't able to hear the question.
Well, the CRA requirements of banks, is there anything that could be or is linked to the ADU development?
Not at this point in time. It's just looked at as regulations aside, we lend straight to what our government entities regulate us to lend to. So at that point, we look at, okay, do they qualify from a federal government standpoint? When we get into the regulations per county, per city, things like that, it's based on the permitting and what the contractors are advising us the cost to build will be, because when we are doing a residential loan like this, we are not the experts, as these gentlemen are, on what the code is going to be, what the different city regulations are.
Could you pool it though? Could you pool your bank and other banks?
Potentially, but that would be something that would have to be done at such a high level.
And keep in mind that, all of the financial institutions, the depositories, the banking depositories that serve us, the CRA stands for Community Reinvestment Act. And it is a federal law that banks must comply with, that encourages them and sometimes requires them to invest in certain ways. And it's an important law. A number of the affordable housing, Network for Oregon Affordable Housing, which is a nonprofit and also a loan fund like us, they receive investment from banks as guided by the CRA. The issue there is that they are making affordable housing available. So the link in my mind between what we're talking about here and CRA is a programmatic approach that directs these homes toward low to moderate income homeowners, not short-term rental, long-term rental. So could be an access to capital perspective, but it also requires a programmatic and policy box that's got to fit.
Right, and the CRA programs in Oregon right now are not targeting ADUs in any way, shape, or form. Because currently, when you're talking about a CRA program, as Adam just stated, you're talking about low to moderate income. Currently, when you're talking ADUs, we're talking about equity stakes, we're talking about cash on hand. So right now, those two aren't linked. It would have to take governing bodies and banks to sit down and say, how do we create a program to do that? These gentlemen are our link between that at the moment, and they're developing more and more options. And eventually, and Susan Brown, my manager, is actually here today, and this is something we were just discussing up here, is how do we make it more affordable? How do we make it possible? But again, we're talking about a process that's going to take time, and it's going to take minds like the guy sitting up here to come in and help us see that future light so we know where to direct that traffic.
And if the occupants are going to be low income, maybe that would help get the CRAs to apply.
Exactly. That's the other thing. We have to get their interest and their eye on the prize here, because if they don't see ADUs as something to invest in, they are going to put their money elsewhere. CRA only has so much to go around. So guys, I'm so sorry. We have to wrap up, but you can bombard them with questions. Just walk up to them, pushing them off. Thank you very much.